We've now got 20 minutes for questions, so have we got a roving mic in here? No? If you gestured at, but I don't have my glasses on. See, I don't have my glasses on. We have a roving mic. So if anyone has any questions, please just raise your hand. Hi, Rosie.
Thanks very much. Rosie Allett from Child Poverty Action Group. It's one of your tough questions, Hanna, that I know if I'd read your blog I would know maybe the answer to. It's really the dreaded question around when people will get feedback and kind of comments on the report when they put it in, because it's, I suppose it's a bit like a kind of tax return. It's an ongoing process of submitting things at the same time as developing the next year's reports. I suppose what sort of timescale are you thinking of if end of June is the ultimate deadline for people to have a sense of, I suppose, what the report was like, what the expectation is of the next year, etc.
So do you mean when the final reports are handed in?
Yes, I suppose what process is there at the moment, realising that it's still developing?
Yeah. One of the key questions in the blog was who is going to read these, and we had agreed as the national group of partners that capacity allowing that we would happily provide feedback on each report, not in a public way, I don't think, at this stage, but just in terms of providing our expertise and highlighting areas that you might want to think about. In terms of timescales, I don't know is the honest answer to that question. It's something we'll have to discuss. So it would be interesting to know from you what would be useful, and how long a time frame would be too long for it to be useful. So that's not very helpful, I'm afraid. But the important point is that we are willing to provide feedback. It's also worth mentioning, I think, the Poverty and Inequality Commission is going to be looking at the implementation of the Act more generally, so there's a chance that they may also provide some feedback on local reports. And Audit Scotland as well are doing a review in 2022-23 of the poverty legislation. So as well as that national group providing feedback, there will also potentially be input from other organisations, and the Scottish Government may have something that they want to say around this as well.
Yeah, I think the key thing from our perspective is that local partners will get some feedback.
Sorry. The important thing to say, I suppose, is that from our perspective, we're really keen that you get feedback on the work that you're doing. So once the local action reports have been published, we'll be talking with Hanna and partners about how we best do that. And in fact, we're going to be talking about that shortly. So we would expect that you would get some feedback. We're not quite sure of the delivery mechanism for that at the moment, but you will get some feedback on your local action report shortly after publication. But we'll have to finalise details on that.
Any other questions?
Hanna, can I come back to just Rosie's point there? We did talk about that at the last meeting, didn't we, as well? And we said, I think, we can't give a commitment. It's unreasonable for us to give a commitment that we couldn't make. So if 32 reports come in May the 1st, and they ought to be in June, it would be unreasonable for us to give a firm commitment. But I think what we would do, the minute any reports and development stages come in, we'd have that quick conversation about when you would find it useful to get that report back, and we would touch base amongst national partners about what we can deliver. So it wouldn't be a case of you'd be left waiting. We would give you a reasonable response. But I say it would be unreasonable for us to make a commitment that we couldn't hold. That's why there's no simple answer.
Thank you. Hi, it's Sonia Scott, consultant in public health from Greater Glasgow and Clyde. Can I get two questions, if that's okay, if I'm quite quick with them? One relates to the income from employment driver. Colleagues in NHS Health Scotland recently looked at a really generous estimate of the number of jobs available in the west of Scotland and the number of people seeking work. and for every 10 people seeking employment, there are 7 jobs available. So I'm interested in, because it's fantastic to see all the employability funding in the National Delivery Plan, but how does it relate to our industrial strategy, and how are we linking it to job creation? And then what can we do at a local level? Where are our ins there in terms of having a discussion about how we create jobs? And then my second question relates to the driver about income from social security. We have Healthier, Wealthier Children in GGC, and it's been fantastically successful. I think the latest calculation is £21 million have been generated from families, really busting the myths that people know how to navigate the social security system. But that really relies on capacity within money advice services. And what we're finding is that funding for those services is quite fragmented. There are pots across the system, but it's not very coherent and coordinated. So it's great that there's money going to CAS, Citizens Advice Scotland, out to our CABs, but some of our providers, very experienced providers in Greater Glasgow and Clyde, aren't Citizens Advice Bureaus. So perhaps if there's a future tranche of funding, we could think about maybe extending beyond CABs. And I think there's a need to look at how we can coordinate and cohere funding for money advice services more generally.
Okay. Go for those. Well, thanks very much for those. Sorry. There we go. Thanks very much for those really interesting questions. So I suppose there's 2 levels to the employability agenda here. So first of all, it's about individuals getting into work, but also about progression within work. And part of that involves thinking about the quality of jobs that are available. So there needs to be that kind of higher structural thinking that goes on at national level about how we can make sure that the economy is delivering the right kind of jobs with the right kind of pay and the right kind of flexibility built into those. So that's an enormous challenge, and it's not one that you won't be surprised to hear that we've cracked within the first 9 months of the delivery plan, but it's certainly within the delivery plan that kind of economic focus is really key going forward, and we'll need to be addressing it as we move forward into the next delivery plan period, definitely. And in terms of the financial health check and citizens' advice funding and money advice funding, I hear what you're saying about money advice, and that's something that's certainly been brought to our attention previously. What I think I'd say is that financial health check is a 2-year programme, and we will be looking from that, after that's finished, about what the landscape is looking like at local level more generally, and be really happy to have discussions about that going forward. Okay.
Any further questions?
Hi, I'm Stephen Sinclair from Spiro, if anyone wants to talk to me, or particularly John later on. Just in relation to the employability, and this is maybe a question for John Dickie, because he has the expertise. I was just thinking about the stipulations of universal credit and the sanctions on people who already actually are in employment if they don't make what are regarded as reasonable efforts to increase their employment, and the implications of that for family income. And do we have any estimate about the likely impact of that in terms of numbers, in terms of household income, and what we're going to do about it?
I don't think, in terms of the actual estimates, I'm not aware of any estimates of numbers of. I'm sure they will actually. We can look into that and come back to you in terms of the numbers of potentially people who might be affected by in-work conditionality and sanctioning as a result. I suppose that, to me, it comes back to thinking about the kind of advice and support and information that both individuals need, but also that employers need to be able to understand what the interactions between the new look social security system is and their employment, so that employers are aware of what their employees are facing, but employees are aware of what they need to be doing to ensure that neither their universal credit or their work is at risk. So there's a kind of an interplay there, and I think a way of potentially bringing employers into thinking about advice and information in terms of income maximisation. But also, I suppose it is about thinking about this, the implications for the kind of jobs, and I suppose just building on Sonia's point as well, in terms of this is not just about employability and supporting people into work, it's about actually creating not just the number of jobs, but if we're looking at this from a child poverty lens, the kind of jobs, so that those bits of local government and its partners that are responsible for economic development, business support, spending local resources in terms of the kind of economy that is being supported, that we're looking at the kind of jobs as well, and all, are those jobs the jobs that the kind of groups that we know are most at risk of poverty are going to be able to enter and sustain and increase their hours in. And recent work from JRF, for example, very much highlighting how those households, particularly lone parent households and households affected by disability, if we could crack employment in those groups, then actually we'd go a long way towards cracking the child poverty issue. So making sure those things are factored in. So I've kind of strayed from your question back to Sonia's question, but hopefully that's helpful. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Or points or comments? No. I don't have glasses on, so wave if you do have your hand up in a minute. Okay, well that's great. That means we're a wee bit early for a break, so we'll be back in here at 11:45. Is that right? 11:45. So you've got 45 minutes for networking, and there'll be coffee outside as well. So thank you very much.